This is lesson 33, and we'll be discussing the grand staff. In musical terms, pitch refers to how high or low we perceive a tone to be. There are two basic types of sound waves, random waves and uniform waves. We perceive random waves as indefinite pitches, or essentially noise. Uniform waves are perceived as definite pitches, or in other words, musical tones. In Western music, we refer to specific uniform sound waves or musical tones by letter names. The musical alphabet consists of just 7 letter names, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then we just repeat that pattern, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, etc. If we are ascending or getting higher in pitch, we go through that alphabet forwards, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. If we're descending or going lower in pitch, we go through that alphabet backwards, G, F, E, D, C, B, A. The composer represents pitches or specific musical tones on the staff by placing note heads on and above and below the staff. So a note located on line 1 of the staff will sound different than a note on space 4 of the staff, provided the clef is the same. Remember that a full-length keyboard will have 88 keys, and that there's always a recurring pattern of, other than this orphan black key here, 2 black keys followed by a space where there are just 2 white keys next to each other, followed by 3 black keys, another space where there's no black key and the 2 white keys are touching, then another group of 2 black keys, space, 3 black keys, space, 2 black keys, space, 3 black keys, space, etc. This is, of course, very helpful when we're trying to orient ourselves on the keyboard, because if we find a group of 2 black keys and go to the white key directly to the left of that, we know this is a C. And so there are lower Cs, and then as we move to the right, we can find all our higher Cs. We also learned specifically about middle C, which is the C right in the middle of the piano. So our 2 black keys, the key directly to the left of it, this would be our middle C.
So if you recall from our previous lesson, we can know that the composer wants us to play that specific C on the piano, that key that we're calling middle C, the C right in the middle of the piano, by notating it on a specific location on the staff. So if we're in treble clef, our middle C will look like this C. And there's another C in the treble clef up here, and another C up here. But those would be different Cs on the piano. They wouldn't be middle C. Likewise, if we were in bass clef, the composer could put a note on the first ledger line above the bass staff, and that would also be a middle C. So we would know that that is the specific pitch we need to play on the piano if we see either of these 2 situations.
So in music, we have a huge range of pitches available to us within the range of human hearing. The range covers approximately 8 octaves. So each letter name of the musical alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, is obviously repeated many times. Because of that, people have developed a numbering system called scientific pitch notation, or SPN, as a way of distinguishing between notes that share the same letter name, but that aren't in the same octave. It allows us to refer to a specific pitch, like a higher C versus a lower C, by specifying its octave. The numbering begins on C, and the number of the lowest octave is 0. So for example, we would have C0, D0, E0, F0, G0, A0, B0. Then we would get to our next octave, C1, D1, E1, F1, G1, A1, B1. Next octave would be C2, D2, etc. So the lowest note of the piano is an A, but it's not just any A, it's A0. And the highest note on the piano, full-length keyboard, is a C, but it's not just any C, it's C8. And middle C on the piano is a C, but it's not just any C, it is C4. This isn't super critical information for you to retain for music reading purposes, but I just wanted to introduce you to this concept and to this system. So in case you run across it, you won't be thrown by it. And in case you do find it helpful for your specific instrument, and so you know there is a concrete way of speaking about and labeling specific pitches, not just a C, but a specific C, not just an A, but a specific A. So just to show you this practically, this is A0. So there would still be lower pitches below this. This is A0 though, that's what we have on the piano as our lowest pitch. This would be C1, so this is technically the second octave of our musical range, C1. Here's C2, here's C3, C4, which we also know as middle C, C4, C5, C6, C7, and C8.
Returning to Jay Albrecht's Ready to Read Music, we're on Unit 3, which is the pitch unit, Lesson 4, Grand Staff. Sometimes the treble clef and the bass clef are combined like this. Piano players read notes on the combined treble and bass clefs like this, which is sometimes called a grand staff. So you notice that you have this bar line that connects the treble and bass staff, and then you have a bracket here. So when we have a grand staff, the notes of the treble and bass staves that are connected by that bracket should be played at the same time. Usually the treble clef notes will be covered by the right hand of the pianist, and then the bass clef notes will be covered by the left hand of the pianist. Albrecht also points out that this is a double bar line. It appears at the end of a piece of music. So it's a bar line with an extra bar line, and that extra bar line is just super thick. That helps you know you're at the end of the piece of music. Here's what music looks like on the grand staff. So this is an example of a minuet written by Jean-Philippe Rameau. This piece of music for piano was written by a French composer named Jean-Philippe Rameau. The composer of a piece of music is always listed at the top right above the first staff. I just want you to take a moment, if you've come this far in the course, to just take a look at this piece of music and recognize how much you've already learned. So we know that we have a staff consisting of 5 lines and 4 spaces that we count from the bottom to the top. We have measure lines, which you'll note on a grand staff, they actually go all the way from the top of the treble staff to the bottom of the bass staff to help us know that we're reading these 2 lines at the same time. You've also learned how to draw and what the meaning is of a treble clef or G clef and a bass clef or F clef. You've learned that this is a time signature and you know how to interpret it. This would be an example of simple triple meter where we would have 3 beats per measure and a quarter note would be our beat or pulse note. You know these are 8th notes, and that in this time signature, they're worth just half of a beat, because our quarter note is our beat or pulse note. So our 8th notes will receive just half of that value, which is half of a beat. We now know, even if it would take you a minute to decode, but this is going to be a C. And we've also learned that that's actually a middle C. So we know how to find that on the piano. We know that this is a half note and that in this time signature, it would be worth 2 beats. And we know that this is a dotted half note, and that in this time signature, it would be worth a half note, which is worth 2 beats, plus the value of the dot. Dot is worth half of whichever note it's dotting. So this would be worth 2 beats plus 1 beat, so 3 beats total. If you have a piano or your music room has a piano, you can see how the notes on the piano match up with the note names on the grand staff. Notice that the first ledger line below the treble clef is a C. So we're talking about this note right here, which we've already discussed. This is middle C. And that the first ledger line above the bass clef is also a C. So this is our other C. On a grand staff, it's the same note and is known as middle C. So of course, he did a great job of lining this all up. Both of these ways of notating middle C are legitimate, and both would indicate that we should be playing this specific key on our piano. And you can see the reason we need a treble clef and a bass clef is because it's much, much easier and requires far fewer ledger lines to read all of these low notes down here in the bass clef, because they are all mostly on the staff or just a bit above and below. So it's pretty easy to read them at a glance. And all of these notes, these keys here, these letter names, these specific pitches are most easily read by notating notes in the treble clef. You can see that all of these notes mostly fall easily within the staff, and some need to be a bit below or a bit above the staff, but it's still pretty easy to read them. So in the treble clef, a C4, C5, and C6 would be quite easy to read. It would coincide with this pitch on the staff, this pitch, and this pitch. And in the bass clef, C3 and C2, and even lower than that, are going to be pretty easy to read. This would be a C2, and this would be a C3. This would be a C2, and this would be a C3.